Advanced Counterintelligence and Surveillance Detection, a comprehensive guide. In the modern landscape of personal security, the ability to detect and counter unwanted surveillance has evolved from a specialized skill reserved for intelligence operatives to an essential competency for ordinary citizens. The proliferation of sophisticated tracking technologies, combined with increasingly intrusive surveillance capabilities available to both state and non-state actors, has created an environment where personal privacy requires active protection. The human instinct for threat detection, honed over millennia of evolution, often manifests as an inexplicable feeling of being watched or followed. This intuitive awareness, while sometimes dismissed as paranoia, frequently represents the subconscious mind's processing of subtle environmental cues that indicate potential surveillance. Understanding how to validate these instincts and respond appropriately forms the foundation of effective counter-surveillance practice. Understanding the surveillance threat landscape. Contemporary surveillance operations encompass a broad spectrum of activities, ranging from sophisticated state-sponsored intelligence gathering to opportunistic stalking behavior by individuals with minimal training or resources. The democratization of surveillance technology has fundamentally altered the threat environment, making advanced monitoring capabilities accessible to virtually anyone with modest financial resources and basic technical knowledge. Professional surveillance teams typically operate with multiple operatives, sophisticated communication systems, and extensive planning capabilities. These operations often involve detailed reconnaissance of target patterns, the establishment of observation posts, and the coordination of mobile and static surveillance assets. However, the vast majority of unwanted surveillance encountered by civilians involves less sophisticated actors, including stalkers, private investigators working for suspicious spouses, or individuals conducting harassment campaigns. The psychological profile of stalkers reveals certain behavioral patterns that can aid in detection. These individuals often exhibit obsessive tendencies, may have previous relationships with their targets, and frequently escalate their activities over time. Understanding these behavioral patterns helps in recognizing early warning signs and implementing appropriate countermeasures before situations deteriorate into physical confrontations or violence. Recognizing stalking behavior and unwanted attention. The identification of stalking behavior requires careful observation of both overt and subtle indicators. Unlike professional surveillance, which aims to remain completely undetected, stalking behavior often contains elements designed to intimidate or control the target. This fundamental difference in objectives creates distinct detection opportunities for aware individuals. Environmental awareness begins with establishing a comprehensive understanding of normal patterns within your daily routine. This baseline knowledge enables the rapid identification of anomalies that might indicate surveillance activity. The process involves cataloging regular elements of your environment, including typical pedestrian and vehicle traffic patterns, standard operating hours for local businesses, and the usual demographic composition of areas you frequent. Repeated encounters with the same individual across multiple locations and timeframes, particularly when these encounters occur in geographically diverse areas or at unusual times, constitute a primary indicator of potential stalking. The statistical probability of genuinely coincidental meetings decreases exponentially with each additional encounter, especially when the individual appears to be observing your activities rather than engaged in their own legitimate business. Digital harassment has become an increasingly prominent component of stalking behavior. Modern stalkers leverage social media platforms, messaging applications, and email systems to maintain persistent contact with their targets. This digital dimension of stalking often precedes or accompanies physical surveillance, creating a comprehensive harassment campaign that can be particularly psychologically damaging. The manipulation of personal belongings or environmental elements around your residence or workplace represents an escalation in stalking behavior that demands immediate attention. These activities, which might include moving items in your home, tampering with your vehicle, or interfering with your mail, are designed to demonstrate the stalker's ability to access your personal space and create a sense of vulnerability and helplessness. Advanced counter-surveillance techniques. The foundation of effective counter-surveillance lies in the systematic development of observational skills and the implementation of detection methodologies that reveal unwanted attention without alerting potential surveillance operators to your awareness. Professional counter-surveillance practitioners employ a range of techniques that can be adapted for civilian use, with appropriate modifications for legal and practical considerations. Surveillance detection routes represent one of the most effective methods for confirming suspected surveillance. These carefully planned routes incorporate elements specifically designed to force surveillance operatives into positions where they must reveal their presence or abandon their mission. The construction of an effective SDR requires understanding human psychology, urban geography, and surveillance operational constraints. An effective SDR typically includes multiple direction changes, the use of choke points that limit surveillance positioning options, and the incorporation of venues that provide natural observation opportunities. Shopping centers, with their multiple entrances and complex internal layouts, offer excellent opportunities to observe potential surveillance while appearing to engage in normal consumer behavior. The key to SDR effectiveness lies in making the route appear natural and purposeful, while incorporating elements that would be difficult for surveillance operators to navigate without detection. Reflective surface utilization represents a fundamental skill in counter-surveillance operations. The urban environment provides numerous opportunities for covert observation through windows, mirrors, and polished surfaces. Mastery of this technique requires practice in using peripheral vision and developing the ability to observe reflected images while maintaining normal behavioral patterns. The goal is to gather intelligence about potential surveillance without exhibiting obvious counter-surveillance behavior that might alert skilled operators to your awareness. Routine variation serves both defensive and offensive purposes in counter-surveillance operations. From a defensive standpoint, unpredictable patterns make surveillance planning significantly more difficult and resource-intensive. Offensive applications involve the deliberate creation of opportunities to observe potential surveillance operators when they are forced to adapt to unexpected changes in target behavior. The digital dimension of counter-surveillance requires specialized knowledge of electronic communication systems, mobile device security, and the various methods available for electronic monitoring. Modern smartphones represent particularly significant vulnerabilities, as they continuously broadcast location data, maintain detailed logs of user activities, and can be remotely compromised to enable covert monitoring of conversations and activities. Digital security begins with understanding the various methods available for compromising mobile devices and personal computers. Spyware applications, often installed through social engineering or physical access to devices, can provide comprehensive monitoring capabilities to unauthorized parties. These applications typically operate in stealth mode, making detection difficult without specialized knowledge and tools. The implementation of digital counter-surveillance measures requires a layered approach that addresses both technical vulnerabilities and operational security practices. Regular security audits of personal devices, including the systematic review of installed applications and network connections, help identify potential compromises. The use of specialized anti-spyware software provides automated detection capabilities, though these tools require regular updates to remain effective against evolving threats. Physical security and environmental control. Physical security measures encompass both active and passive elements designed to detect, deter, and document unwanted surveillance activities. The implementation of these measures requires balancing security needs with normal lifestyle requirements, as excessive security measures can create their own vulnerabilities by attracting unwanted attention or restricting personal freedom of movement. Home security systems have evolved significantly beyond traditional alarm systems to incorporate advanced surveillance detection capabilities. Modern security cameras with motion detection and smartphone integration provide real-time alerts about unusual activity around residential properties. The strategic placement of these devices creates overlapping coverage zones that make covert approach and observation significantly more difficult for potential stalkers or surveillance operators. Vehicle security represents a critical component of personal protection, as automobiles provide numerous opportunities for the installation of tracking devices and offer predictable locations for surveillance teams to establish observation posts. Regular physical inspections of vehicles, particularly in areas not easily visible during normal use, help identify tracking devices or other surveillance equipment that might have been installed during unguarded periods. The detection of electronic surveillance devices requires both technical knowledge and appropriate equipment. Consumer-grade RF detectors and camera-finding devices provide basic capabilities for identifying common surveillance equipment, though their effectiveness depends on the sophistication of the equipment being used against you. Professional-grade detection equipment offers enhanced capabilities, but requires significant investment and training to use effectively. Documentation and legal considerations. The systematic documentation of suspected surveillance activities serves multiple purposes, including the validation of your own perceptions, the creation of evidence for potential legal proceedings, and the development of patterns that might reveal operational characteristics of surveillance teams. Effective documentation requires attention to detail, consistency in recording practices, and an understanding of legal requirements for evidence preservation. Photographic and video evidence, when obtained legally and safely, can provide compelling proof of stalking behavior. However, the collection of such evidence must be balanced against personal safety considerations and legal restrictions regarding privacy and surveillance. In many jurisdictions, the documentation of individuals in public spaces is legally permissible, though specific circumstances and local laws may impose restrictions. The involvement of law enforcement agencies requires careful consideration of timing, evidence quality, and the specific legal frameworks applicable to your jurisdiction. Many law enforcement agencies have specialized units trained in stalking and harassment cases, though the response quality can vary significantly based on local resources and training levels. The presentation of well-documented evidence significantly improves the likelihood of effective law enforcement response. Legal remedies for stalking and harassment vary considerably between jurisdictions, but typically include restraining orders, criminal charges, and civil litigation options. Understanding the specific legal protections available in your area enables more effective planning and response when confronted with unwanted surveillance or harassment. Advanced threat assessment and response planning. Threat assessment involves the systematic evaluation of potential risks based on observed behaviors, stated intentions, and the capabilities of individuals or groups conducting surveillance. Professional threat assessment considers factors including escalation patterns, access to weapons or other resources, and psychological indicators that might suggest increased danger levels. Response planning requires the development of specific protocols for various threat scenarios, including immediate escape routes, emergency communication procedures, and coordination with law enforcement agencies. These plans should be regularly reviewed and updated based on changing circumstances and threat levels. The psychological impact of sustained surveillance can be significant, affecting sleep patterns, social relationships, and overall quality of life. Recognizing these effects and developing appropriate coping strategies, potentially including professional counseling support, forms an important component of comprehensive personal security planning. Conclusion. The ability to detect and counter unwanted surveillance represents an essential skill set in the contemporary threat environment. The techniques and principles outlined in this guide provide a foundation for personal security enhancement, though their effective application requires practice, situational awareness, and sound judgment. Remember that personal security is ultimately about maintaining your freedom to live normally while protecting yourself from those who would violate your privacy and safety. The investment in counter-surveillance knowledge and capabilities pays dividends not only in enhanced security, but also in increased confidence and peace of mind. In a world where privacy is increasingly under attack from multiple vectors, the ability to protect your personal space and activities becomes not just a tactical skill, but a fundamental aspect of personal sovereignty. If you enjoyed this video, please hit like and subscribe. Be careful out there!